Hello, everyone, and welcome back to day 13 of our Legacy Leadership Journey, Wisdom of the Apostle Paul. Today we're going to be looking at Worthy of Imitation, Part 2, here on day 13 of day 30 in our devotional Legacy Leadership. This is Part 2, Worthy of Imitation. We're going to continue to look at what it means to be worthy of imitation as we imitate Christ. And so what that means to call people to follow us as we follow Christ. So let's get into it here, and we'll reflect and respond along the way. Feel free to participate in our Facebook forums or respond to the emails. If you have any questions, I'd love for you to send them in to me. For the second half of the devotional, I am going to be asking for questions. I really want to, I don't think I'll have all the answers, but I will seek them out. We might even have some guest speakers here on the devotional to try to answer some of those questions. But I really wanted to connect one-on-one with you guys and through the group forums or email over the coming weeks as we get closer to meeting one-on-one. I wanted to try to ramp up the actual discussion that's taking place. So I want to encourage you guys to ask questions. And I would ask questions to the group, not to me specifically. And these don't have to be questions that are specific to this devotional. They can be, and certainly since it's the topic that we're discussing, that's fine. But anything that's coming to your mind about how you want to get better, how you want to make your group get better next year, or some things maybe that you want to improve, or questions that you have, I want to start getting these questions out into this discussion, because I know we all have some burning questions and things we've just been trying to get done. And I really want to start digging into those over the coming weeks, since we're almost about a week and a half out now of meeting face to face. Very excited about that, everyone. Let's get going on this devotional, and you're going to hear me say it a million times over the next few days. Let's ask questions about coaching. Let's ask questions about leadership. Let's ask questions about this devotion. Let's ask questions and do everything we can to try to grow closer together as we ramp up to these on-site face-to-face meetings. So looking forward to it. Here we go, devotional day 13, Worthy of Imitation, part 2. Paul understood that we are looking for and in fact need people who model the way for us. He was acutely aware of the importance of a leader providing a model for people to follow, and he encouraged people to imitate him. Reading those exhortations today, we may think that Paul was pretty arrogant to offer himself as an example to follow. But if we read those passages closely, it is clear that he was offering Christ as the ultimate example, not himself. He told the Corinthians to imitate him because he himself was imitating Christ. He commended the Thessalonians for having become, quote, imitators of us and the Lord in 1 Thessalonians 1, verse 6. In the second letter to the Thessalonians, he provided a specific command to imitate the work ethic he exemplified while living among them. I think this is huge because when we're talking about imitate the work ethic, that is something that absolutely, as we look at leaders and we look at people around us that we follow, we will see a work ethic. And I think if we pay close attention to what Paul says here, we can kind of glean some things into our life on what we can do to step up our game. This is coming out of 2 Thessalonians 3, verses 7 through 10. For you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us, but we were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. But without toil and labor we worked night and day, that we may not be a burden to any of you. It was not because we do not have that right, but to give you and ourselves an example to imitate. I know the wording in that version it trips me up a little bit, but as I kind of glance through it and read through it, it's so interesting that he's saying we want you to imitate us, but notice what we didn't do. We didn't sit around and idle. I'd say, maybe channel changing. I wasn't sitting around channel changing with you, kicking it on the couch. Nor do we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. So, as they're traveling, they're working to earn their way. As they're teaching and giving this information and sharing this good news with people, they're not expecting something in return. They're still bringing their own scratch to the game here. But with toil and labor, we worked night and day. So, in order to do some of the things during the day that they were doing, perhaps they had to work at night. What does that look like? Well, for me, I work during the day. So if I want to go further in my leadership, then I guess I need to work during the night as well. But it's probably not going to be for my paid career. So I think that work that I pull out of here is all this extra growth work, all this extra development work in the areas of leadership, coaching, discipleship, mentoring, counseling, even as I'm starting to go deeper with certain people and I get into certain situations. I don't always know what to say, and so I need to spend time looking at and putting in that work, toiling and laboring. So keep that in mind. It says that we may not be a burden to you. So I don't want to be a financial burden to those that I lead. I don't want to be an information underburden. So I need to work. I need to toil day and night to not only work on the relationships and do my job, but also better myself, grow, do things that I've never done so that I can get somewhere that I've never been. That those types of things are real. I think it happens in our financial life, our spiritual life, our personal life. We have to make sacrifices, and that is worthy of an imitation. So we know we're not perfect. We know that we're led to Christ, and we're trying to lead others to Christ. And being worthy of imitation isn't to say, imitate me, I am Christ. It's to say, imitate me, I'm trying to imitate Christ. And here's the effort that I think needs to be put into it. And that's why we're always looking at how we spend our this daily devotional time, how we spend time in the quiet of the day and listening to God. Those spiritual disciplines are super important. So I believe that passage there is absolutely critical for this devotional. And when you see someone doing these things, I believe it becomes easy to imitate. And once you're doing these things, I think it's also becomes easier to reach back and pull other leaders along with you. So this is a great example. Continuing on, obviously imitation was an important theme for Paul. He offered himself as a model of leadership for others to not just follow, but to imitate. He encouraged the Philippians to, quote, join in following my example, imitating me, and observe those who walk according to the pattern you have in us. Philippians 3, verse 17. This theme is repeated in Philippians 4, verse 9. The things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace shall be with you. Being worthy of imitation is a core dimension of Paul's philosophy of leadership. He offered himself as a leadership model worthy of imitation, and he expected other leaders to meet the same standard. He instructed his protege Timothy to follow the pattern of the sound words which you have heard from me in the faith and love which are in Christ Jesus, in 2 Timothy 1, verse 13. Not only was Timothy to follow Paul's example, he was also to be an example for those who followed him. Paul encouraged him to let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself an example of those who believe. 1 Timothy 4, verse 12. Similarly, he commanded Titus that in all things show yourself to be a good example, an example of good deeds, with purity in doctrine, dignified, sound in speech, which is beyond reproach, so that the opponent will be put to shame, having nothing bad to say about us. That comes from Titus 2, 7 and 8. So not only are we to follow Paul's example in this work ethic and as he follows Christ, but we do also want to be an example for those that follow us. What does that look like in our neighborhood groups? I think that's our language, our behavior, our communication styles, even our authenticity. For our neighborhood groups, I believe one of the biggest things that is required for us to help people grow forward is to get vulnerable and to have a place of authentic community where we can actually open up with each other. So in order for me to do that in my neighborhood group, I experienced this over a year ago, maybe even a little longer. I was noticing that the conversations were remaining pretty shallow, and I started to kind of think about my responses and how I was responding in terms of my vulnerability. And I realized I wasn't modeling vulnerability. So I spoke to someone about that, learned a little bit about that, and started to model vulnerability as a coach. And the next thing you know, I'm getting vulnerability in the group, but I'm also having people pulling me aside and saying, hey, you know what? I wanted to talk to you about something. Do you think we could set up some time or whatever to go through something you might be able to coach me through? So as in that example, like I was modeling or doing something that I was taught to do. I was modeling somebody else technically. So I was imitating someone else, and then by doing it, someone becomes imitating me. And that's a great example for me of not only am I to follow this example, but I'm also to be an example to those who follow me. So let's reflect and act on these questions. Number one, who is watching you as a leader? Who is watching you as a leader? Think about your spheres of influence. It's different people in each of those spheres. The age ranges vary, and just keep that in mind. Who is watching you as a leader? Number two, what traits do you hope they imitate? What traits do you hope they imitate? And number three, are there any characteristics of your leadership that you hope others will not imitate? Those are our three questions for today. Maybe you can hear my kids at the door back there. I'm going to go have fun with them this weekend, but wanted to catch up on this devotional with you guys. Looking forward to it. Send your questions in. I'm very excited to bring those questions to the group and to our leaders in neighborhood groups and see what we can come up with for answers and feedback. And I'm really excited to spend time with you guys here in just a not too distant future. Thanks so much. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Take a quick moment out of your day to thank a service veteran or to say a quick prayer for those who've given some and those who've given all as we remember them this weekend. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.